I'm sure you're all familiar with TikTok, but have you ever had a creepy experience with it? I don't know if I would call my experience haunted, but it was unsettling. In the year 2020, during the peak of the coronavirus pandemic, we were all confined to our homes and trying to find ways to pass the time. As someone who lived alone, the months of lockdown were particularly isolating. Even though I could call my friends, they didn't have much to share, besides their newfound hobbies. I never used to be the type who would say, "Hey, I feel like making a TikTok video." No matter the reason, I wasn't a fan of those who displayed their lives for others to watch. However, when one is alone with nothing else to do, one will do whatever it takes to keep from going insane. And that's precisely what I did. I downloaded the app. I am uncertain whether the unsettling feeling I experienced after installing the video hosting app was due to my phone, my condition, or the platform itself. The initial video I encountered on the app was a jump scare, heightening my unease. Firstly, let me tell you that I have phobia on top of nyctophobia. So whenever I am exposed to such situations, I start sweating excessively and start gasping for air. It's almost as if someone is stopping me from breathing, and it takes a while for me to maintain control over my body, using a few techniques taught during my CBT. I felt apprehensive about reopening the app, but I remembered the coping strategies I had learned during my exposure therapy, which unfortunately had been interrupted by the pandemic. It was unwise to face my fears alone, but thankfully, no more scary videos appeared until the following day. Like many others, I explored new hobbies and learned new skills during the lockdown. One of my interests was culinary arts, and I spent a fair amount of time trying out different recipes while watching tutorials on YouTube. I was eager to make myself a hearty breakfast on this particular morning. As I reached for my phone to access my teaching app, my thumb accidentally clicked on TikTok. Suddenly, a video of a girl wearing a creepy mask with red hair appeared. My phone fell from my hand, and I couldn't help but gasp for breath, startled by the unexpected sight. As the video looped incessantly, dizziness washed over me, causing me to collapse unsteadily onto the ground. With trembling hands, I fumbled to exit the app, which seemed to take an inordinate amount of time. It was as though I was trapped in a never-ending cycle of disorientation and confusion, and it took several long minutes for me to regain my composure and control of my senses. With a trembling hand, I hastily removed that app from my phone. Alas, the social media algorithm is unforgiving. Your phone becomes inundated with similar content once you indulge in one video or stream, and that is precisely what happened to me. YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and other platforms bombarded me with related content. Despite my repeated attempts to express disinterest, they persisted in their intrusion. Eventually, I lost control and threw my phone against the wall when I saw another video of that girl on Instagram, shattering it into pieces. Perhaps it was due to my phobia or being locked in my house alone, but the following events were a blur. I vaguely remember crawling to the refrigerator and grabbing a bottle of water to drink, which I guess I spilled all over me while falling. I made several attempts to get up, but my legs were numb, so I eventually gave up and continued sitting on the floor for several minutes until I regained some senses and got up. That night, I twisted and turned on my bed most of the night, and when I finally slept, I experienced sleep paralysis for the first time in my entire life. My whole body was frozen, and as I struggled to move my limbs, I felt something heavy on my chest, as if someone was sitting with all their weight on me. She was finally visible with her creepy smile mask with makeup painted all over it. The pulled-out, messy red hair on that mask made her even more terrifying. My phobophobia intensified my fear as I started suffocating and feeling tightness around my throat, as if someone had cut off my ability to breathe while strangling me. I don't know if it was a hallucination or a side effect of my near-death experience. But when I could finally move, I think I started experiencing symptoms of a heart attack, which subsided soon, followed by a sense of relief. I started getting even more nightmares about that masked girl, and my condition worsened daily. Thankfully, the Android cell phone I used before buying this iPhone was still locked inside the drawer of my closet. So I took it out, put my SIM card in there, and attempted to schedule an appointment with my doctor. But it was not feasible due to the lockdown restrictions. Nonetheless, my doctor was a kind man who spent several hours conversing with me and guided me to conquer my fear independently. Through my ongoing episodes, I realized I needed to contact my doctor more frequently. Fortunately, he was always available to answer my calls and offer invaluable therapy sessions. Despite the fees associated with these sessions, I am incredibly grateful for their significant impact on my well-being. They proved to be even more beneficial than I initially anticipated. I have never reinstalled TikTok or attempted to stream any horror videos. Yet during the COVID-19 lockdown, I realized that I no longer experience the symptoms of fear that used to plague me when others talked about such topics. It's been how long? 3 years since the pandemic hit us, right? The only thing I'm grateful for about those times is how much I have changed and how my perspective to see some things have improved, including the horror. However, despite overcoming my phobia, I still would not intentionally watch scary videos. Nonetheless, I am pleased to say that I no longer experience shortness of breath or uncontrollable sweating when accidentally coming across a horror video.
Hey guys, thanks so much for all the support. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please feel free to do so. The case of Anna Abulaban. Social media has become such a big part of almost everyone's life, and there's a lot of image projecting that people have to do to keep the charade of the life in. And with so many platforms to keep, there is so much of projection waiting to be done. And the constant appreciation and validation that social media provides you will get you hooked on it. It is like a drug, and then you just have to keep projecting it. And that is where the lies and deceits take over, and people confuse it with truth. In the given video you see, the truck empty, and inside that truck is daughter of Anna Abulaban and Ali Abulaban, a couple that got famous on TikTok, and the project that they kept of the happy life, and how it all came to an end because an irrational, violent man was stern on projecting his happy image when he clearly was not one of those personalities that he created, and instead was a deceitful abuser. And this is something that would pull away yours and mine trust from humanity. Ali was the TikTok influencer with the perfect wife and perfect life, so everybody thought. But away from the small screen of their TikTok, things were sinister and deceiving. Ali was the charming, caring husband on the screen, but away from that, he was a controlling, obsessive husband, violent on occasions. He used to make TikToks one morning, and the same afternoon, he would restrict her even getting out of the house. The things got worse with time, and the domestic violence grew worse, but people barely knew anything about it. He was the best caring husband to the world, so it was easier for him to hide behind the image that he had created. Not even the user could figure out the red flag in their relationship, but when it did occur to them, the viewers were not slow to point it out, and some comments on the post indicated that something was up. They would see signs of violent incursion, but even after no strong evidence were found and everybody dismissed everything, he would obstruct her any attempt to meet with people. Soon, the people saw that the image of perfect couple was definitely tarnishing with time, and people started seeing Ali, and he was drifting and turning into an alcoholic. One morning after posting online and all drunk and heavy, he decided to do something irrational. He went to where his wife was living, all dirty and scary looking, almost like a zombie. He broke into where she was living and ransacked the place, and then installed a spyware in his daughter's phone to spy on his wife, and then went on to spy on his wife. One day, he decided to spy in on his daughter, trying to overhear, and while she was living differently, he overheard her talking and laughing with a guy. He was enraged by all of it. He was so enraged that he decided to rush to the place and confront them in the act. He was adding up scenarios in his head, like the one where she is in bed with another man, and then it all just boiled him up from the inside, and he straight away headed to the place. Enraged and in immense anger, he was out of his senses and willing to take down anything and anyone that comes between him and her. She was more like a property to him. As he entered the home, his senses were clouded with anger, and he shouted, "So this is what you are doing behind my back!" They were startled and scared, and even though they were just standing in the kitchen while the daughter was out in the backyard, "There's nothing going on over here," said the man who was with her. "I'm not talking to you," said Ali. Anna was scared, and she wanted to just go with him. She was scared, and the man she was with said, "She don't want anything from you, man. Why don't you leave?" And that is when he was frustrated, and in anger said, "I am not talking to you, you lying bastard." And that is when in immense rage, he took out his gun and pointed at the man and shot him and killed him, and then pointed the gun at his wife and screamed at her while he shot her right in the head. She died too. Now, not knowing what to do, he panicked and took his daughter and left, and then all panicked called his mother and confessed about the killing. And as he was driving away, he soon saw the police chasing him. He was full of guilt and scared and ran away, leaving his daughter in the car. The police found the daughter in the car all by herself, and the husband ran. He tried pleading innocent in front of the judge. Now, why would an innocent person run, leaving his daughter all alone?
"I'm getting bored. Why don't we play a game?" Natalie said as she turned off the radio. "I'm not in the mood to play a game, Nat. Just come listen to the radio," I said while focusing on the road ahead of driving. "There's nothing good on any channels. Traveling with you is boring." She crossed her arms and pouted. "I'm Sean, and the girl sitting beside me in the car is my younger sister, Natalie. The two of us are driving to Beverly Hills for a cousin's marriage, and since our parents are already there, we are going to be the last ones to arrive. It had already been more than 2 hours since I started driving, and as the night was falling, I was getting sleepy. Only if Natalie knew how to drive as well, then we would have taken turns, and that way I could get some rest as well. I guess to stay focused and awake, I had to play whatever ridiculous game she came up with. "Fine. Tell me, what game you want to play?" I said, sighing. "I knew you would come around. Then let's play I Spy." She cheered up, hearing me agreeing to play the game, and said in excitement. "Isn't that the game kids play?" I asked. "So what? Do you want to play or not?" She pouted again. "Stop pouting and just start the game," I said. "Okay. I spy something green," she said while smiling like a child. "Is it a tree?" I asked while looking outside as the area was surrounded by trees. "Nope. Think harder," she said while grinning like she was winning. "What else green do you see here? Of course it's a tree," I said as I continued my focus on the road. "No, it isn't. Put some effort, will ya?" she said in a commanding voice when I noticed something on the road. "A man?" I said while trying to look if it was a man on the road. "No, silly, it was a bench," she said. "No, look, it's a man." I grabbed her head with my hand and tilted it to the road where the man was standing and looking directly at us. What is he doing in the middle of nowhere? I didn't think there would be many vehicles coming at this road in the middle of the night. Her voice had curiosity in it. It was not just her. I was just as curious as her about this stranger on the road. I bet the place was spooky this late at night, so what was he doing here all alone? "Should we help him?" I asked, and she nodded in agreement. So I stopped the car when we reached the area where the man was standing. "Do you need help, mister?" Natalie turned the window mirror down and asked the man. He didn't speak a word. Instead, just nodded his head yes. "Where are you going?" I asked. He just pointed his finger at the road ahead. "I think he cannot speak," Natalie whispered in my ear, and I thought maybe that might be the cause, so I agreed we'd give him a ride and drop him off wherever he wanted. So let him in the backseat of the car, and then I started driving again. Nat even asked the guy if he wanted to play a game with us, but he shook his head no. "Nat, don't irritate him. Let's just not play the game anymore. Try and get some shut-eye, okay?" I said, as she pouted her lips again and replied, "You know very well, brother, that I won't be able to nap on the drive, and you won't be able to as well since you're driving. So wouldn't it be better if we play to pass the time?" Her logic seemed convincing, but I was in no mood to focus on driving and gaming both. "Let's play a game about who can stay silent the longest." As I said that, my shoulder was met with a quick punch while she said, "You're the worst." Man, her punches are as strong as ever. While we were bickering, the man was silently sitting in the back seat observing us. We took our glances at him once in a while as well, and every time we looked at him, he was sitting as still as a statue. There had been many occasions before where we helped some hitchhiker while we drove anywhere, but this was the first time someone is as weird as he was with us. The way he kept staring at us was more like a menacing glare, which kept making me uncomfortable, but looking at how Natalie looked carefree, it might have just been my imagination. As I was driving, I got to a point where I had to turn left, but some roads were leading straight and right as well. So I stopped the car before making a turn, instead turning to the back seat to ask the man if he wanted to go somewhere other than left. But the moment I turned back, a blood-curdling scream left my throat, which made Natalie turn as well, and her face turned pale as well. I was sure I did not make any stop in the middle, and just a few minutes ago I saw the man sitting behind me, but now there was no one there. The seats were empty as if there had never been anyone sitting there. His sudden disappearance had made our blood run cold to the point where I was feeling nauseated. Did we just give a ride to a vanishing hitchhiker? Natalie's voice was trembling, and words were breaking as she spoke. "Who?" I asked, trembling. "I'll explain all that later. First, let's just get out of this place." As she said that, I started the car and drove at a higher speed than before so that we would get away from him as far as possible. I was still afraid, thinking, what if he suddenly appeared traveling again in the back seat? But thankfully he didn't. After we reached our destination, Nat told me about the ghostly hitchhiker who was famous for hitchhiking to people traveling in different places and subsequently vanishing without explanation. We were not the first victim who had been through it, though. There have been many people across the world who had met him. But whatever the case, I hope we never encounter him again.
In February of 1970, American pop rock band The Boys released a song simply called Timothy. A singer-songwriter named Rupert Holmes had discovered the band in the late 1960s, and they talked to a record company called Scepter Records to sign them on to a one-single contract. The deal was secured when Holmes promised Scepter Records that they wouldn't have to spend a dime promoting the band, as he did all of that himself. With very little to lose, the label signed The Boys, and all that was left to do was pen the first hit single. Rupert Holmes contributed greatly to both the song's music and lyrical concept. You see, he had an idea. one that was most definitely a gamble. But if it paid off, they'd be millionaires by the end of the following year. But when he presented the idea to the band, they thought he was crazy. As it turned out, Rupert's stellar marketing idea was to get the song banned. Not banned altogether, of course, just banned from being played on various radio stations across the U.S. Because if Rupert Holmes knew one thing about America's youth, it's that if you told them they couldn't have something, by God, did that ever make them want that all the more. This is also a time when cursing on records was also completely out of the question. So the question was, how would they walk the controversial tightrope without actually falling off? And the answer was writing about a controversial subject. The band, along with Rupert, decided to tell the story of 3 miners trapped in a shaft after a freak cavern accident. But as the song states, when they broke through the polished free, the only ones left to tell the tale were Joe and me. The 3rd miner, the one who didn't make it, is the eponymous Timothy, as the narrator laments in the chorus. Timothy, Timothy, where on earth did you go? Timothy, Timothy, God, why don't you know? The song then mentions the miners being particularly hungry, as mentioned in the line, hungry as hell, with no food to eat. Joe said that he would sell his soul for a piece of meat. And only when they get to the final verse do we realize what's actually happened to poor Timothy. I must have blacked out just around then, because the very next thing I could see was the light of day again. My stomach was full as it could be. Although it never explicitly stated in the song, it's clearly and heavily implied that the 2 surviving miners are only alive because they killed and ate Timothy. Once the record was released, it attracted only a small amount of attention, given that the record company hadn't ran any promotions. However, it wasn't long before young listeners started to deduce poor Timothy's fate, and a storm of controversy began to brew. Young people called into local radio stations requesting the song and over until it was played. Disc jockeys instantly recognized what the lyrics were referring to and were appalled that such creepy and haunting lyrics could be paired with such an upbeat sounding song. Then, exactly as Holmes and the boys had predicted, the song started getting banned. Not officially, mind you. Just certain radio stations refused to play it and condemned the song's dark themes. But that only meant that competing radio stations would pick up the song and play it just to poach listeners away from rival stations. Young people sometimes bought the single just to read the lyrics on the inside sleeve, all to confirm that, yes, the song was indeed about a horrific incident of cannibalism. In the end, Timothy climbed the U.S. single charts until it eventually peaked at number 17. All things considered, it was a titanic achievement. One of the first times a record had been lucrative without any backing from its record label. But while Rupert and the boys celebrated their guerrilla success, no one stopped to think of the implications. Timothy had proved that Western audiences crave something a little more visceral than just jingly pop numbers with meaningless lyrics, and that a huge section of the public would actively pursue controversial or banned material. The gorier and more disturbing, the better.
Halloween night. I'm 12 years old, growing up in Fontana, California. I had arranged to ride my bike over to my friend's house. We go trick-or-treating in his neighborhood, and then ride back home with my candy by 8:30. All goes to plan. I get a fat sack of minis, and I'm riding my bike back along the sidewalk. I come across this guy leaning up against the wall, lit up by a streetlight, smoking a cigarette, wearing a dark hoodie. And as you get near him, he looks at me and calls out like, "Nice costume, kid," then steps out into the sidewalk to check out my costume and ask me about it. He was being real friendly, and I was way naive, so it's not like alarm bells were going off. He then asked for some of my candy, and only then was I worried that he might actually take any of it. I would have been absolutely heartbroken if I'd gone to all that effort only to get jack for my candy on the way home. So I reached into my bag, pull out a few minis, and then hand them over. This seems to satisfy him, and he thanks me for asking what my costume was, my last memories of me explaining who Nightwing is. And then, the next thing I remember, I'm waking up on the concrete and my legs hurt. I turned my hand and then see my legs are all wrapped up in a bike frame. But I also see the same dude who stopped me pull out a knife and be like, "Give me the bike." I'm so dizzy and stuff that I had to kick the bike away from me just so he could take it. And I realized then that I'm on the floor because the guy knocked me out somehow. I'm guessing with a sucker punch or whatever, because I could taste blood in my mouth. He picks my bike up and somehow find my feet. And I know I should have been scared, but I was only so hazy that I honestly couldn't feel anything but just like a resigned numbness. The whole thing only really hit me when the guy told me to take my shoes off. I had the sick Nike Air Maxes on that were my brother's navy blue and perfect for the Nightwing costume. They weren't mine, so I told the guy no, and I couldn't give him the way because there were my big brothers. That's when the guy hit me again, and although it didn't knock me out, it definitely knocked me on my butt. Then, as I'm sitting there, fighting back tears, he actually takes them off my feet, and I'm too scared and upset and mad that I just didn't do anything about it. I just let him the whole time. I'm thinking, this guy might stab me just because, so I just couldn't fight back at all. Then, he says something like, "I'll leave you with your candy though." Like he's saying I'm a good guy, really? Sure, I just knocked out a 12-year-old, but I'm a good guy at heart. It's one of the few things from my childhood/teenage years. It actually still really bugs me to this day, and I still remember walking home in my socks like it was yesterday. My mom and dad called the cops for me as soon as I got home, but they never caught the guy to my knowledge. Sick thing is, the guy's probably still out there, thinking he was a good guy for punching a 12-year-old, but leaving him with his candy.